We're here at Pulse 2012 and with a wonderful opportunity to visit Grady Booch's Computing the Human Experience project, and there's an aspect of it being filmed right here at Pulse this year. Of course, Grady Booch is an IBM Fellow and many other things, more titles than I could possibly introduce, but good to see you again, Grady.
Good to be here. Good to see you again.
And this is Jan Booch here with us as well.
Yes, my wife and creative partner in this
working with
endeavor.
Grady.
So
Yes.
nice to meet you, Jan.
Thank you.
Well, give us a quick sense of just what, this is a small part of a much larger project. Tell me
Yes.
what it is.
So the small bit you're seeing here behind us is we're trying to collect 2,000 or more videos of people's humans experience, YouTubeable moments, 2 to 3 minute videos of how computing has touched their lives individually. We're looking for experiences in terms of their first time they've interacted with computing, what they have their dreams for their kids as well too. The intent is we have this premise that computing has so profoundly changed us as a civilization. We want to hear the individual voices along the way. And this is an effort that's part of a much, much larger project. Carl Sagan some years ago had Cosmos, which introduced a generation of people to the wonders of the universe. We're trying to do a similar kind of thing. Indeed, he once said that we live in a world that is exquisitely dependent upon science and technology, and yet much of the world doesn't understand science or technology. The same thing can be said of computing. We live in a world that depends exquisitely on computing, and yet much of the world doesn't understand that. I'm an insider, and we want to open the curtain upon computing to the general public.
Jan, and your part in this.
My part in this, I'm a psychologist and social worker and theologian, and so one of my goals is to help Grady be interesting to the general public and to put the human side on it, because I really do believe that the story of computing is the story of humanity. And so we're trying to make it so people understand that computing is not really about machinery. It's really about people and how it touches our lives.
Well, and you're doing a great job, by the way, of making them interesting. The conversation you had this morning in the keynote with Steve Woz. I mean, is that what everybody calls him, Woz? Is that that's the short name? Co-founder of Apple. I mean, what a fascinating conversation, and how timely with what you're doing here with this project, right?
Yes. Woz is very passionate about education. We had some long discussions about that, and he recognizes too there's a whole generation growing up, the digital generation, that doesn't understand what's behind their screen, and he'd like to open the window to them. Much like what he discovered in his innovative days, well, not to say that he's not still innovative, but in the days in which he was just wildly creating with Steve, there was an opportunity to play, to try out things, and this intense curiosity, and he'd like to bring that to kids as well too.
So what are you hearing from people? I mean, what did the conversations you've had so far and what you're capturing?
Oh, God.
You know?
Great
Some
stories.
Great stories. We have one story where someone talks about her first memory of computing when she was 4 years old. Her mom was a psychologist, and her mom decided she was going to quit being a psychologist and become a computer scientist. And she saw this computer as a rival for her mother's affection. She decided that her mother loved that computer more than she loved her. We have other people talking about how they met online and how now they're married and they're expecting their first child. We have stories of the Arab Spring and the Libyan Revolution, all sorts of stories that are they're about people. They're about people's lives and how computing helps them.
And the essence of what this is doing is confirming our thesis that computing has changed humanity just as humanity has changed computing. And we're capturing those stories one by one. Just 7 billion more to go.
And so our goal is to have people take out their iPhones, their iPads, their webcams, and make a video. Tell us what your human experience is of computing, and then send it to us, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. Interview your children.
How do they do that?
Well, email us at info@computingthehumanexperience.com, and we'll handle the details from there.
What about, in summary form, you guys' stories? What would those sound like? Your first touches? I'd love to know what those sound like.
So I remember my dad worked for Burroughs Corporation, and so I remember being a little girl, and he took me to his work, and there was this big room with a raised floor and great big machines that made lots and lots and lots of noise, and it was hot in there. And then there was this machine that spit out pieces of paper with all these X's and zeros, and it made a Mickey Mouse that they were doing. What was that called?
ASCII art.
Yeah, ASCII art. And then in the corner I found one of those that had a naked lady on it. It was like so exciting. And my dad's like, no, computers don't do that.
Great.
I built my first computer at age 12, so that was my first encounter. I wanted to know how one was made, and so I did it. Just built it myself.
And what was the model that was your inspiration for getting started?
Gosh, the model for it. read a lot of books, and in fact one of them was this great story about John Backus. So here I was 12, and I was going around Amarillo, Texas. Nobody was going to hire a 12-year-old.
Amarillo, Texas.
Yeah, exactly. But I knocked on every door that had a computer, and they were going to hire me. But I eventually knocked on the door of the local IBM office. And a sales guy there took me under his wing and said, this is cool stuff, and looked at my schematics. And one day he handed me a Fortran manual, Fortran 4 manual, and he said, go off and read this. And I figure he expected I'd never come back because I'd get lost. A week later I came back and had written some programs. And he found me time on a local IBM 1130 computer where I self-taught myself how to key punch and do debugging and programming, and wrote my first programs that way. The postscript of the story is pretty cool because I had the opportunity in working with the Computer History Museum to do an oral history of John Backus, the inventor of Fortran. So I carried with me that very manual and had him sign it. So.
Wow, that's a great story, and we've got an Amarillo connection. I never knew
really?
you had that. I went to high school in Amarillo.
What high school?
Amarillo High School.
I went to Amarillo High School.
Did you really?
What year did you graduate?
1978.
Okay.
But
oh
you?
My gosh, 73.
Not that far off.
No, you were in the new high school because ours burned down. Remember that?
I never knew this about you. You know, and Amarillo was my story too, because my stepfather was an orthodontist in Amarillo.
Yeah.
He had a really early IBM desktop top computer, and that was about the time when MIDI started.
Oh, yeah.
And being a musician, discovering MIDI, and one of the first sequencers enabled me to start realizing music that was in my head that I never knew how to get it out before, other than just try to scratch it down. You know,
so good things come from Amarillo.
Absolutely. So again, more to come, and if they want to follow this on YouTube, the channel would be?
It's Computing the Human Experience. If you go to our website, computingthehumanexperience.com, you'll see a link to our Twitter feed, our Facebook page, and the YouTube channel.
Fantastic. Grady Booch, Jan Booch, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Scott Lanningham at Pulse 2012.